If you're struggling finding a horror movie themed around Thanksgiving, this is the video for you. We've got plenty of Christmas horror movies, obviously plenty of Halloween horror movies, but what about in between? Today we're taking a look at Eli Roth's aptly named horror movie, Thanksgiving from 2023. This movie is so funny, it pays homage to a lot of the 70s and 80s slashers. It brings about a new horror icon that I hope embeds itself in the horror community for a long time to come. This movie has some of the most fun and creative kills that I've seen in recent memory, some very brutal and amazing practical effects. So we start the movie off with this really cool POV shot. Again, this is an homage to a lot of the 70s and 80s slasher flicks. This is the type of filming technique that would be used from the POV of the killer in those older films. And it's a very interesting use of it here, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. That's why this shot is used, and we're told that this is happening on Thanksgiving. We're quickly introduced to our cast of characters, which includes our main character, Jessica, and her group of high school friends. They are getting ready to go to Riot, which is owned by her father. It's kind of the big store of the town. It's a Black Friday. Well, it's Thanksgiving. It's about to be Black Friday. And there's a straight up mob forming outside of the store. Everybody's waiting to get in. They have light security. And of course, Jessica and her friends get in a little bit early. They go through the employee entrance because they know a guy. And this angers the crowd to no end. They get extremely upset over this, and this is kind of the whole reason why this tragedy happens and the killer comes back to wreak havoc on them. So eventually the mob storms the store and the pressure is too much and the doors break and this poor security guard is trampled. The other security guard kind of bitched out and ran away earlier, and he's just trampled, and it's hilarious. This guy gets his neck stabbed. A lot of cool kills in this sequence alone. This lady, Amanda, she falls onto the floor. We'll see her death in a second, spoiler alert. And everybody's after these waffle irons. It's so hilarious. Jessica is dating Bobby, and apparently he's like an all-star pitcher and whatnot. So of course, in this opening sequence, he's trying to crawl to help this security guard, and he gets his arm completely broken in half. One of the harder scenes to watch, if you ask me. And then we come back to Amanda, who is crawling around, and we get our first death. She gets whacked in the head with a shopping cart, and then these two customers are battling back and forth. Her hair is caught in one of the wheels, and they straight up scalp her and then just move on with their day. And then the sheriff, realizing the horror that has unfolded before him, shoots his pistol up in the air, and then I'm assuming that just makes the crowd stop and just puts an end to the whole tragedy. I'm not really sure because we go straight into a title card at this point. Fun fact about this title card, this movie started out as a fake trailer for the movie Grindhouse that was put up together by Eli Roth, and now it's a full feature film, but apparently the font and the colors and everything in the title card for the full-length film were used on that original trailer. If you haven't watched that trailer, you should go check it out. It's a lot more brutal than the feature film ends up being, but it's lots of fun. You just have to search like Thanksgiving original trailer Grindhouse. You have to make sure to put Grindhouse in there. Go watch that. It's a lot of fun. So after the title card, we jump forward a year and we find out that Evan had made parody videos of the tragedy and posted them on the equivalent to YouTube, and it just kind of disrespected the tragedy as a whole. And we see our serial killer watching the video on a little laptop, and it pans up to some newspaper clippings about the tragedy, just kind of giving us a little introduction to our killer. The killer is terrorizing Jessica and her friends by reposting a bunch of these things after they try and delete them and tagging them in these social media posts, and apparently that's the most terrifying thing to ever happen to them. He also vandalizes a historic site that Riot was going to use for some commercials to promote Black Friday this year, and conveniently steals an axe that was up on the wall, and that is going to be our murder weapon for the rest of the movie. We find out that Jessica's mom died and that Kathleen is her dad's new boo, and it's kind of put a lot of tension between her and her dad. He doesn't really quite get that yet. Before she can even explain herself, Kathleen comes around the corner and Jessica just gets really pissed and says, of course, we can never get a moment of time together alone. So we've established that she's got a lot of tension between herself and her dad. Jessica and her friends go have lunch at this diner, and she thinks that she sees Bobby, who has disappeared for the last year, and her friend even sees him, but it's not confirmed at this point whether that was him or not. And it turns out she's dating this guy, Ryan, who apparently nobody else likes. And it's made very clear to us that this waitress is not a fan of them. She was part of the mob at the beginning. Which leads us to our next kill. We see the killer watching one of those videos and pauses it on a frame with the waitress dead center on it. And while she's closing up one night, the killer attacks her in one of the most brutal kills that I've seen. There's a lot of layers to this. First, he slashes her arm, and then he dips her face into the dishwasher sink and then sticks her face to the freezer door. Ouch. She pulls away, a bunch of her skin falls off, and she tries to escape but can't find her car keys. But of course, our killer is in her car already, flashes her with the high beams and chases after her. She pulls a Prometheus and just runs straight towards this dumpster. She doesn't take a left or a right, and she falls into the dumpster, and the dumpster straight up cuts her in half. Very likely, probably pretty realistic. The killer puts the body on display on the Right Mart building and continues to post on social media while tagging Jessica and her friends. After checking the security footage, the cops can only determine that the killer was wearing one of these pilgrim masks. Jessica's dad confirms that he's still going to go forward with another Black Friday opening, and he's just hiring additional security this time, much to Jessica's dismay. We run into this guy who's going to be a pretty important part later on. He just says that he's not selling guns to kids, he's selling alcohol, and he promotes his little party that he's having for all these high schoolers. Shortly after, we have the scene with the sheriff trying to convince Jessica to tell him all her dirty little secrets, and Bobby returns to the picture shortly after as well, and she reveals that Kathleen, her new stepmom, deleted the security footage from Right Mart's security room the night of the tragedy to avoid bad publicity. But she knows that there's a backup server at her house, which, let's talk about that really quick. I feel like someone would know that there's a backup of the security footage at someone's house. Maybe they would have checked his house. I don't know. I've never been involved in something like that, but to me, I was like, would anybody else know other than her dad and Kathleen and Jessica? But she tells Bobby that she knows where the security footage is, and she's going to go check it out and see what she can find out. Our next kill is the security guard that fled the scene at the initial Black Friday tragedy. We've got a fun little kill here. He's got an Uber waiting for him. He's about to skip town. He's looking for his passport, and he's stabbed in the stomach with this drill or this mixer. I'm not really quite sure what that is. And then he loses his head. Gotta blur that here, but it's a really fun kill here. And then we find out that our serial killer has a little soft spot for animals, and he feeds a little kitty and pets her before he leaves. After reviewing the security footage, Jessica prints out some still images from the security footage, and then her dad kind of reaches out to her and says like, hey, I'm sorry, I was basically thinking with my dick, and now I realize it was at your expense. And they have a little hug, a little heartwarming moment. Jessica takes those still images to the sheriff, and they find out that her new boyfriend Ryan was dapping up the security guard who got trampled in the beginning, and apparently that's a huge red flag. And so now they're suspecting that Ryan is the killer. Jessica and friends realize that no one can be trusted, and all they've got is each other, and they explain this all in their little cosmetology school. Bobby and Ryan measure dicks in the parade float building warehouse here. We get another kind of random but very brutal death here. These two were just part of the crowd at the beginning of the movie. They're not even part of the main teen friend group, but this kill is really brutal, and there's a version of this in the original trailer as well. Pretty cool that they incorporated it here. The cheerleader here wants to give her boyfriend a little striptease, so she hops on the trampoline, and she must be a real head turner because his head gets twisted 180 degrees, and then he's just sitting there all funny like. And the killer silently makes his way under the trampoline and sticks a knife while she's jumping up the trampoline. You see her foot get like cut in half, and he stabs her repeatedly until she bleeds out on the trampoline. Football gets canceled, and Evan has this huge temper tantrum about it. And this dude who we met earlier, I don't remember his name, to be honest, but he shoots off this musket because he was going to do it at the end of the game. And then this leads to a completely normal conversation between Jessica and her friend about how her dad used to make her shoot these guns, and she became a pro at it. I bet that's not going to come back later. Gabby and Evan go back into the school together to get changed, and they run into the killer, and we can only assume that at this point he either kills them or captures them. But he also steals Gabby's phone and texts Jessica to come here. She analyzes it for a second, and she goes looking for them, and the killer tries to attack Jessica. They have a little fight, and she runs off to her school. The killer finds her, but she sprays him in the face and then gets away. Bobby confronts Ryan about his relationship with the security guard, and he simply explains that he was getting Adderall from him so that he could focus on school or testing or whatnot. And so that pretty much puts that to rest for now. And as punishment, the sheriff tells Ryan and Bobby both not to show up during the Thanksgiving parade. Bummer. One of the members of the friend group, her name is Yulia, she gets hauled away by her dad and says, hey, we're going to Florida, we're skipping town. She's apparently dating this guy, and they're like, we have to act fast. The cops aren't acting fast enough. And so this guy, here he comes back into play. He gives Scuba a gun so that he can defend himself. He offers to give Jessica a little belt knife, but she refuses. Back at Yulia's house, John Carver takes out this cop, her dad, and sticks a pair of those pokey corn things in her ears. Ouch. Scuba and Jessica arrive at the house and threaten to shoot John Carver, but when Scuba goes to shoot, either the gun isn't loaded or he forgets to take off the safety. I'm not completely sure which one it is, but at that point, realizing that Scuba isn't a threat, John Carver throws Yulia onto the saw blade, turns it on, and runs off, and unfortunately that is the end for Yulia in yet another brutal death. Scuba is so sad here, just holding Yulia in his lap. Next, there's a huge meeting where everyone decides that Riot Mart is going to be closed for Black Friday, but Jessica convinces everyone that they should proceed with the parade so that they can try and catch the serial killer. Back at the parade, everything is fine and dandy until the guy in this turkey costume gets his head chopped off, causing a chain of events that leads to the Riot Mart truck running into this stilt guy and their boat crashing through the truck window and killing the old grandpa in the front seat. Now, I've got to blur this kill here, but let me tell you, the prosthetics and the practical effects in this movie are just outstanding. You got to go see this. Again, like I said, I might be releasing a Patreon where I would have exclusive uncensored content on there. So a video like this, you'd be able to see the kill straight up instead of having it censored like this. But yeah, this is an absolutely brutal kill. John Carver, now donning this creepy ass clown mask, steals the sheriff's car that contains Jessica and her friends and her dad. Elsewhere, Kathleen wakes up and is being prepared like a Thanksgiving turkey, but her sedative wears off and she attempts to escape. And she actually puts up a pretty good fight, but unfortunately, John Carver catches up to her and fucking spears her in the back with his pitchfork and drags her back in and roasts her in the oven, akin to Moby in Saw 2. Is his name Moby? Pretty sure his name is Moby. I have a few issues with this scene. How does the killer get from the parade to wherever Kathleen is that quickly? There has to be, like, at this point I'm thinking that there's got to be two killers. That's the only way that this makes any sense at this point. And also, Kathleen looks around for like a couple minutes looking for an exit. She tries to get through a boarded up window, but then when John Carver catches up to her and she's running away, she just like goes through the front door or some shit. Like, why didn't she just go that way the first time? She would have lived. The cops zone in on a location of a live feed being streamed by the killer, and so they head over to the spot. But when they get there, they realize that it's just a phone streaming a different live feed, Liveception. And shortly after, the real feed starts streaming. And in one of the most diabolical horror scenes, John Carver has all of his victims sitting around a table and he unveils Kathleen's cooked body on the table before everybody, including Jessica's dad. He lets Evan know that his initial video that he uploaded to YouTube inspired him and kills him by streaming it, making him the star that he always wanted to be. Look at all those likes. And then the killer carves out a piece of Kathleen's leg and is about to serve it to Jessica's dad. Again, I'm bad with names. I don't remember what his name is. But then Jessica and Scuba both escape from their chairs. After shortly battling it out with John Carver, Jessica gets free and starts running away. John Carver eventually catches up to her and she makes it over this fence, but not before her bracelet gives her a hard time. Doing live commentaries and explaining this to you guys really helps me point out the flaws in this. Like, where did she run to? Where did she run to that the cop is here? I gotta play this really quick. I don't know, it's just gotta randomly be near the fucking parade warehouse, because that's where they end up, right? Anywho, as Jessica's running, she comes upon the sheriff's body on the ground, probably assumes that he's dead, and then she looks over and she sees John Carver. Have I been saying Carter the whole time? It's Carver, John Carver. I've been saying John Carver, right? She sees John Carver go into the building, and of course, in true, dumb, heroic fashion, she runs after him. While inside looking for the killer, she sees Bobby, so of course she assumes that he is the killer, and the sheriff just like pops up behind her, is like, hey, go outside while I take care of this. We hear some gunshots go off inside, and then the sheriff pops out and tells Jessica that he lost Bobby, essentially. So Bobby is gone without a trace, apparently, and everything seems to be fine and dandy. The other cop is here, the crime scene investigator is here, and they're pretty much just saying, like, we got everyone else, they're out, they're safe. Sorry for everybody that has died already, but we're gonna get you to the hospital and have you checked out. The sheriff has to turn in his gun because he fired it. And as the sheriff is walking away, Jessica notices that his pant leg has these, like, stickers from a weed on them that could have only gotten there through the path of chasing her out of that house. Let me just show you this scene that leads up to that. He just haphazardly tries throwing this piece of paper in the trash, and then he bends down to grab it, and that's when she sees it. Like, it's just, this movie is so silly at times. I just had to pause it and laugh out loud when I was watching it. So she realizes that he's the killer, then he realizes that she realizes that he's the killer, and he unveils the whole mystery. Why are you doing this? She asks. And we find out that he was in love with Amanda from the beginning. She was gonna leave her husband for him, and she was apparently pregnant with the sheriff's baby. She's like 61 years old. she's a little older here. I don't know how believable that is, but that's his motive. Now I want to remind you, everyone is blaming this on Jessica and her friends because they went into the store early on Black Friday, and they're saying that that's the only reason that the crowd stampeded. That's what we're basing this motive on, is that fact right there, and that is absurd and silly, and I love it. After he's done confessing, Jessica also confesses that she has been live streaming his confession to the entire world at this point, and in an act of desperation, the sheriff attacks Jessica and is stopped by Bobby, who throws a hammer at him through the window, and then Bobby and Jessica start running away. Jessica turns on the flammable gas to this float, and they're driving away in Bobby's uncle's truck. Of course, the sheriff is relentless and keeps chasing after them, and eventually we get the call back to the musket. Told you that the musket was going to come back. This turkey float has been filled with the flammable gas all the way. It's this huge towering thing, and the sheriff is standing right in front of it, and Jessica aims up and shoots it and blows the sheriff to smithereens, incinerating the entire building. Bobby and Jessica escape, and then we get to put a nice little bow on this completely flawless, amazing movie. So in the ending scene here, there's a few things to note here. First, we can see them dragging out something that looks like it could be a body, but it's also just kind of nothing. And Jessica gets to have her cake and eat it too. She hugs Bobby, she gets to hug Ryan. She's reunited with her friends, and then there's a very interesting line at the end here that seemed shoehorned in. This firefighter is telling the cops that there's no way that anything could have survived that was inside of the building during that explosion, but we also zero in really closely on a certain firefighter, which is very odd, and we just get this close-up of Jessica's face, which feels like it's insinuating that the sheriff didn't die, right? Am I crazy? And then there's this very obviously overdubbed line from Bobby.
Tell Ryan he's still a dick, even if he's not the killer.
Tell Ryan he's a dick, even if he's not the killer. That feels like it was added in post to kind of leave room for a sequel, perhaps. I've seen a couple of theories online as to why that line was added in, as well as a lot of things that just don't add up in the whole movie as a whole. It's believed that in the script there was initially supposed to be 2 killers, and that would totally make sense with a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie, including the killer having to be in multiple places at once. That line about Ryan at the end. Ryan just disappears for half of the movie, I think. I don't think we've seen him from the parade on. And so that would explain it, that there was supposed to be 2 killers. There's also a scene where the John Carver mask is put on top of an oven and is burnt, but then it kind of insinuates that burnt mask was supposed to be worn at some point, but I don't think it's worn at all. I think it's just swapped out for a brand new fresh mask. So it sounds like there are supposed to be 2 killers, and we have confirmed that there is going to be a sequel. Is confirmed this year. Eli Roth stated that he was turning in the final script in August, so I think we can expect a Thanksgiving 2 around Thanksgiving of 2025, and I'm just gonna assume right now that they're either gonna use the plot point that the sheriff is still alive, or there was 2 killers. Otherwise, where would we really go with it at this point? So that's it. We've reached the end of Thanksgiving. What did you guys think of this movie? If you haven't seen it yet, it is available over on Netflix. It's a lot of fun. It's a very messy movie. It's not flawless. There's a lot of plot holes in it, and I am aware of that, but the dialogue is just hilarious, and the kills, the practical effects, the gore, the blood, it's a lot of fun. Also, one thing I wanted to point out about Patrick Dempsey, love the guy, even though the only thing I know him from is Scream 3. He's one of the detectives in that movie, but throughout the movie, I was his accent sounds a little off. Sometimes it felt like it was way too overboard, and sometimes I couldn't tell that he had an accent, so I was just is that a performer's choice or is that a directorial choice? And there's a little bit of trivia that lends itself to this question. Apparently, Patrick Dempsey was born in New England, and he lost his accent when he became an actor, and he was just channeling that original accent, his original accent when he got the part. And that makes a lot of sense because it was very inconsistent throughout the film, but it's just something that I was glad got confirmed after doing further research. I rated this film a 3.5 out of 5 on Plex, so I'd give it a 7 out of 10 if we're going on a 10 scale. It's a 6.2 on IMDb right now, so it's definitely got a great audience for it. So I love this movie. It's perfect to put on during Thanksgiving week. It's a nice movie to put on between Halloween and Christmas, just that nice little in between. and it plays on consumer culture, and it's just, yeah, it's a lot of goofs and gaffs. What would you rate this movie, and what was your favorite part of it? Let me know if you like this new format of reviewing movies. Like I said, I'm trying to just find a good balance of like streamlining the process so that it's a lot easier to set up videos and film them and get right into editing. So let me know what you thought of this movie review. I love making these videos and these reviews for you guys, but it does take a lot of time and effort. So if you have any inkling to support the channel at all, you can sign up for a YouTube membership or my newly released Patreon. On YouTube, you can just hit subscribe and join to get in right there. There's 2 tiers. It's going to be $4.99 or $9.99. For $4.99, you are just monetarily supporting the channel and just making it a lot easier for me to start doing this full time, and you'll also get a shout out in future videos. And then there's a second tier. I didn't want to get too lost in creating like a bunch of different tiers, so there's just 2 tiers. That first tier at $4.99, and then at $9.99 you get a whole bunch of cool stuff, which includes like monthly live streams to hang out with fellow horror fanatics, including me, obviously. You get an entry into a monthly digital movie code giveaway. You get at least 12 hours of early access to any future YouTube videos that I post here. You get them uncensored, ad-free, and explicit. Like I said, a lot of the kills will be unblurred in those versions of the videos, and you get a 20% discount on any Nonstop Horror merch that you purchase while you're a member or a patron. Of course, there's no obligation, but it does help out the channel a lot, and I appreciate anything that you're able to give. So again, you can sign up for a YouTube membership or my Patreon, both linked down in the description. I appreciate you all. Thank you for stopping by. Make sure to subscribe for more fun, exciting, and informative horror content right here on the Nonstop Horror YouTube channel, and remember to embrace the fear all year long.